Hello and welcome to Salute Your Sports. Kamen Entchev here with Tom Casselman. Ready for a big show today? It's our NFL draft preview. Recording on a Tuesday morning. NFL draft will be on Thursday night. It's going to be an awesome draft. A lot of quarterbacks projected to go 1, 2, 3, maybe 4, but for sure looks like the top 3 picks will be quarterbacks, and the 4th pick could be a quarterback. But there's going to be 4 quarterbacks for sure early in the first round. We'll go over all 4 guys. You know, who's number 1, who's number 2, who's number 3, who's number 4. We'll be focusing on who we think is the best, not necessarily, the mock draft, not who's going to get picked where. We'll talk about probably next week as far as who's in the best position. But for the sake of today's argument, we're strictly looking at talent alone. Who's the best quarterback? Who's the best receiver? Very deep receiving class. We'll be going over some of the big names there, maybe some receiver sleepers perhaps. Obviously, the offensive line, also a heavy offensive line draft, a very offensive-heavy first round. If you look at any of the mock drafts, the first 10 picks might be like 9 offensive players between quarterbacks, receivers, offensive linemen. We will go over the defense, though. A few guys to give out some love out on the defense. Who are the best defensive players in this draft? The top running backs, it appears like a weak running back class, but we know there's always 1 or 2 guys that kind of appear out of nowhere. So we'll be talking about the running backs. So a lot of good stuff to get into as far as the NFL draft. We'll have betting locks of the week. We'll hit on the NBA playoffs and the betting locks for a little bit. Sports trivia, plenty more today. I can't wait to get started, Tom. How are you doing today?
I am doing fantastic, albeit feeling a little bit Jon Snowy, as far as locks of the week and NBA playoffs go. We know nothing. Kamen, we know absolutely nothing.
I don't know, Tom. Our locks are pretty good. I'd argue the other way. I'd argue that we were due for a cold week. We knew too much, apparently. The NBA thought we were reading the script, so they had to rewrite the script, Tom.
Exactly. Yeah, but certainly where a script is pretty well written is at least the first overall pick in the NFL draft, which is where we'll jump off. Of course, quarterbacks are what drive the conversation in this league. And as far as we can tell, whether you're looking at betting favorites, whether you're just looking at the reporting of what has actually gone on, Caleb Williams is probably like 0.0001% chance that he's not. But he's most likely going to have his name called by the Chicago Bears when the draft kicks off on Thursday. He has had no official team visits with any other team. You just read the reporting on it. They are hook, line, and sinker sold with Caleb Williams as the number 1 overall quarterback. And looking at pedigree, they absolutely should be. But thankfully for, whether you play Dynasty Fantasy Football or you are just a football fan who likes watching the more alluring positions, not everybody's really excited about, hey, my favorite team drafted an offensive guard or a tackle or something along those lines. We are replete with quarterbacks in this draft. At least 4 are going to go in the first round, possibly up to 6, as we will talk about that. But we'll start with the big 4. Caleb Williams, as I already mentioned, Jaden Daniels out of LSU, Jerick May out of UNC, and then most likely national championship quarterback J.J. McCarthy for Michigan will be rounding that out. So, Kamen, we've done this a couple different drafts. I think the most recent draft where we did this was the infamous Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, Zach Wilson, and Trey Lance draft, where 4 quarterbacks were highly touted. Not really great results for most of that class, but we're talking about prospect profiles here. Where are you going in terms of ranking these? I think easily we have Caleb Williams, both number 1, probably head and shoulders above everybody else. But quick reference right before we get into this, I do use Dane Brugel. I want to shout him out at The Athletic. If you have a subscription to The Athletic, he has the most comprehensive draft guide everywhere from quarterback all the way through specialists like
better than Mel Kiper.
He is phenomenal because he compiles all of the standard testing data, height, weight, 40 time, etc. He talks to families, coaches, teammates. It's a really, really good.
I thought you were going to say couch potatoes. The fan.
No. I mean, he might get a couple of those. But Kamen, I'll let you jump off here with talk about the quarterbacks and kind of what order you have them in terms of your preference when filling out a draft.
Yeah, I mean, I think we do agree Caleb Williams is number one, but I do want to talk a little bit about him and just how great he is, Tom, because I think we're talking about an all-time great quarterback. I'm already ready to get that gold jacket out, put that
Oh
Hall of
boy.
Fame jacket on Caleb Williams. This guy's got the best arm ability of the top quarterbacks in this draft. He's got really good legs as well. I mean, I know Jaden Daniels is a little bit faster, but as far as running to pass, running over guys with power, Caleb Williams is a great athlete as well. He can make all the off-angle throws. Think of a mix of Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers. I know he's a big Rodgers fan himself. He can run around to pass like Mahomes. He can throw the off-angle passes like Mahomes and Rodgers. He's got a great, great arm, but he's also a pretty smart decision maker and a really accurate quarterback. I think in college, a lot of folks think of USC, everything's easy. If you actually watched USC football games last year, especially like I did, just to watch this kid play, Tom, you witnessed that he had a horrendous offensive line. I mean, USC had a really, really bad offensive line, which is, not normally what you think of. Normally you think of these, top schools, these top quarterbacks. They have all day to throw. Life is easy. His life was not easy. He was running for his life and still making plays. The defense was terrible. He had to literally carry his team, put his team on his back. He did have good receivers. I'll give him that. Obviously, good skill position players at USC. But a lot of folks think of this big level player, this big arm, these off angle throws. But he also was a very smart quarterback and a good decision maker. I mean, you look at last year, he had 30 touchdowns and 5 picks. The year before, in his Heisman year, 42 touchdowns and 5 picks. He had more than 4,000 yards, 4,500 roughly 2 years ago, more than 3,600 this last season, 27 rush touchdowns in his career, but not a lot of turnovers. 5 picks the last 2 years for a guy that, is a gunslinger, a guy that makes a lot of passes, a guy that was actually playing from behind a lot this last season. I know Notre Dame game was not his best game, but outside of that game, he really didn't play bad games in college. I mean, they lost some games. It was because the defense, like Mahomes lost a lot of games in college because he had no defense. Caleb Williams was the same. This guy is absolutely the real deal. Got Hall of Fame written all over him.
Yeah, I mean, playing for USC, I think it was maybe there were 2 games all season where the USC defense gave up fewer than 28 points or something like that. I mean, I know like in college football, the offense can be a bit more prolific than we necessarily see in the NFL, but that's something
where you're giving up more than 30, 40 points every week, you're still not doing a good job.
Yeah, the one knock really that is on Caleb Williams is the fact that as far as the turnovers go, only 5 picks, but he had something like 33 career fumbles, 16 in the past season. And that's one of those things where it's like, okay, is that a product of, not the best offensive line at USC, something that he has, I think, rather diplomatically gone about not blaming them, because I know folks have kind of like tried to like bring that out of him. But as Ryan Poles, the Bears GM, said in talking about Caleb Williams, he says his teammates don't like him. They love him. And I think that's part of the reason why is because
he's not Bo Callahan.
He's not going to go out and throw people under the bus and say, well, what do you expect me to do with all this pressure, holding onto the ball too long, trying to make these home run plays? So like that's the one knock. But like looking at everything about him, it's pretty much, he's got all the physical tools. It's just a matter of how does that translate to the NFL, and that's something where we might be talking a little bit post draft. About once it's officially he's with the Bears, that's going to be like the one little thing. Like I know people like to make the Mahomes comparison to Caleb Williams. Williams is not going to a situation where he has a Hall of Fame coach who is an innovative, amazing play caller who has a set system in place. So I think as far as like I would want to temper those expectations a little bit, but like talent wise, he has everything there.
First off, Tom, I mean Mahomes is the best quarterback that's ever played the game. How I feel about that. So is Caleb Williams going to be as good as Mahomes? No, but he could still be a Hall of Fame level quarterback, even if he has a lot of those Mahomes traits.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying
going in with some good receivers. I agree with you. having Andy Reid versus who he has as the Bears coach, as a defensive head coach, and Matt Eberflus
Mhm.
is a lot different. As
Sure.
far as the other guys, though, this is where
Mhm.
the draft gets really interesting, because if Caleb Williams is the slam dunk, these other guys are like the J.R. Smith. We don't know what we're going to get out of them, in
Mm.
what game, in what day. There's a lot of talent. I think it is similar in many ways to that draft that you referenced a couple years ago. Trevor Lawrence is the big prospect, like Caleb Williams. Then the other guys are big talents, but I'm not necessarily sold on any one of these guys, to be honest. Like, I
Mm.
look at Drake May, I look at Jaden Daniels, I look at JJ McCarthy, and I'm not sitting there thinking to myself, that's a Pro Bowler. That's a top 15 quarterback in the league for the next 15 years. Now, I think Drake May has probably the best arm ceiling. He's got a great arm, a very talented quarterback. But you look at some of the numbers: 24 touchdowns, 9 picks this year, 38-7 the year before. But completion percentage, 64.9, a little bit low.
Mm.
The accuracy is not quite there. I know we took some sacks in college that he shouldn't have taken. The pocket presence, the accuracy, these are massive question marks with Drake May. He's got the arm talent, he's got the
Mhm.
ability, but I don't know if he's going to be really good personally. I think a lot of it's going
Okay.
to depend on how much he can put it together. I think he's got the second best ceiling of these quarterbacks. If you told me who's going to play at their absolute best, he's the number 2 quarterback in this draft. I'm going to put him number 3 for me. I'm going to put Jaden Daniels a little bit ahead of him. A lot of question marks with Jaden Daniels. Obviously, had the Heisman season last year, 40 touchdown passes, only 4 picks. But other than last year, he had never had more than 17 touchdown passes in a single season. Is this the Joe Burrow situation where, Joe Burrow, doesn't get the starting job at Ohio State? He wasn't great in his first year as the LSU starting quarterback. Has Jaden Daniels just gotten that much better? Or is it having Malik Neighbors and all these talented receivers helping him? Can he be consistent? Honestly, Tom, I'm not sure. But the reason
Mhm.
why I'm putting him a little bit ahead of Drake May personally is because I know what I'm going to get out of him as a runner. He had more than 1,000 rushing yards last season. He's a great, great athlete. Even if he's not a consistent enough passer, even if he's not a great passing quarterback, he'll instantly be a top 5 running quarterback in the National Football League. Think about this: in college, they take sacks off your rush numbers,
Mhm.
and he still had more than 1,000 rushing yards in college. This guy's a phenomenal athlete. He's a guy that, I'm going to use the term, the Justin Fields. He could be a Justin Fields where he's a great runner and just a mediocre passer. Is he around an average starting quarterback? That's kind of like the worst case, Justin Fields. The best case, I think, is a little bit more of Lamar Jackson, less
Mhm.
turnovers, takes care of the ball better, a little bit better passer, and still a great runner. So he's probably going to be somewhere in the middle of those guys. But personally, I'm not ready to proclaim him, a Hall of Fame level, a Pro Bowl type quarterback. He can be. My gut feeling on Drake May and Jaden Daniels is middle of the pack starting quarterback. Average to mediocre, a guy that can be really good at times, but also really bad at times. So I'm not
Mhm.
necessarily sold on either of these guys personally as massive prospects. JJ McCarthy is the other guy. He is probably one of the most interesting guys because he lost like 1 game as a starter in college. He won a national championship. Obviously, you give that look, but a lot of it is because of
Mhm.
the defense, because of the coach, because of the running game, because of the offensive line. I know quarterback stat is, a lot of folks looking for win-loss, but I would say of all these quarterbacks, McCarthy was certainly in the best position. A guy that, had 22 touchdown passes each of the last 2 seasons, 9 picks combined, 67.6 completion percentage, fairly accurate when he had to be, but I'm not so sure. I know his arm is better than an Alex Smith. He's got better arm talent. He's a better
Mhm.
athlete even, but I'm not necessarily convinced that, Jim Harbaugh is a really, really good football coach. I get that at Michigan, he's got the big guys. He's got that size advantage. But if McCarthy was so great, I feel like he would have unleashed him a little bit more.
Mhm.
So it just, I know the pro day was good, but I mean, I don't care about that personally, Tom, because you got no pads on, you got wide open
Mhm.
receivers out there. I mean, Blaine Gabbert, former Mizzou Tiger, that the sorority girls thought was a bad quarterback, getting drafted around top 10 because of a great pro day and great measurables.
Zach Wilson had a
Who
great pro day.
cares?
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's different once you get in the game. McCarthy, I think, has the most interesting adjustment because, he's a guy that hasn't been used to getting sacked. How
Mhm.
is he going to respond when there's pressure? What is he going to do? I put him as my number 4 quarterback in this draft, and I look at him as a low-level starter in the NFL, a guy that could be a starting quarterback. But
Mhm.
if he's your starting quarterback, you're probably not a playoff team unless he gets the elite defense and the elite running game like he has at Michigan. Now, I
Yeah.
know a team that's being discussed is the Minnesota Vikings, whether he slips of them, whether they trade up for
They'll
him.
have to trade up
If,
probably.
if he
Yeah.
does have Justin Jefferson as a receiver, that might change. I know next week we'll talk about best position because probably of these guys, he'll be in either the best position or the second best position. So if I rank these guys, 1 through 4, I might put Drake May and Jaden Daniels ahead of McCarthy. I think McCarthy might have a better rookie year than both of them
Mm.
if he does go to the Vikings with Justin Jefferson, if he does go to one of these better teams. So that could change. We'll save that analysis for next week.
Yeah.
I know we'll talk about Bo Nix and Michael Penix and some of these other guys. I think that looking at May, looking at Daniels, looking at McCarthy, I think to me they're very much closer to Nix and Penix. I think those
Really?
3
Okay.
guys are, to me, grouped in the same group as Penix and Nix. They're way closer to Penix and Nix than they are to Caleb Williams, if that makes sense. But there has to be a lot of question marks
Mm.
because we haven't seen Jaden Daniels have 2 great years in college. We haven't seen that. Like, was this a one-hit wonder or is he going to be back?
Yeah.
Can Drake May win these games? What can McCarthy do when he's asked to be the passer? There's a lot of question marks about all of them. Obviously, projecting college quarterbacks to the next level is one of the hardest things to do.
Mhm.
I mean, there's a few guys like a Peyton Manning, in my opinion, a Caleb Williams that really stand out, but the vast majority of these guys, the speed of the game is different. The pressures you face, the athletes, the height, it is way different than college. So it's not easy like this guy was a great college player. He's going to be a great pro player. It's a way, way different game. So it is very hard to project. But my gut feeling is that I think Caleb Williams is the one great quarterback in this draft. I don't think there's a second great quarterback in this draft, personally, Tom. I think the guys behind Caleb Williams
Mhm.
are well behind the pecking order, my gut opinion, personally.
Yeah, Caleb Williams, clear cut one guy. He's in a tier of his own as far as these rookie quarterbacks go. I would say it drops from great to very good as far as what I think for my quarterback
Very
too, which
good.
I'm going with Drake May on this one. And I think Drake
Okay.
May suffered from a couple of different things. One is that had a great sophomore year. Josh Downs was one of his receivers. I mean, he didn't have necessarily as many weapons going into year 3. And we've seen this a couple of different times now where Trevor Lawrence going from his penultimate season before, and then his last season in college, a little bit of a dip down. Caleb Williams, I mean, goes from winning the Heisman to not winning the Heisman. I think that there's a certain level of adjustment that is made at the college level where we see what these guys can be. And then their last season isn't necessarily as good as the previous one. I mean, progress is not always linear in that sense. I think that, of course, landing spot matters. I think if Drake May were to go to Washington at number 2, and again, betting markets are going to say that is not very likely. You have to put you get significant odds on May going
Jaden
second. If he
Daniels
went
is
there,
projected too, I
if
think,
he
by
went
more
to if
people.
he went to Washington, I think he'd be a slam dunk number 2 because he's going into a situation where he has some well defined weapons. Whereas if he ends up in say New England, that's a
Nobody.
lot more nebulous of a
He's got
position for
nobody in
early
New England.
success. But I mean, as far as just like his raw ability, I mean, you mentioned Jaden Daniels, who's my third quarterback. As far as that goes, you mentioned him being compared slightly to Lamar Jackson. I'm going to reference the Beast, where Dane Brugler says it's not apples to apples,
No,
but
that's
Jaden
the
Daniels
best case scenario.
is similar to Lamar Jackson in terms
Yeah.
of how teams have to defend him. So that name is mentioned. The name mentioned with Drake May is Justin Herbert, and I think that's a pretty good spot to be. Have a collegiate quarterback who pretty good, had a little bit of up and down, but then turns out to be a really good pro because the physical tools are there. And as far as his rushing goes, I mean, I know sacks count against your rushing total, but still, I mean, 450 yards rushing, 9 touchdowns junior year, his sophomore year running for just shy of 700 yards and 7 touchdowns. He's enough dual threat where I think Drake May has the tools to be a good quarterback. It's simply a matter of the fit, what ends up around him. If he goes to New England, then New England uses their second round pick on a young receiver, or if they use that to trade for, say, like a T. Higgins, if they build up that support cast around him, I could see Drake May having a career where he's going to be kind of in that like cloud of very good quarterbacks, win with type of quarterbacks. Again, not necessarily as a rookie, because situation definitely matters. I mean, see Bryce Young. This is the most recent example of that. Jaden Daniels, I've got as my third guy. He's the one where he almost might be, I think he's the same level of enigma that JJ McCarthy is. For the simple reason that, and really quick aside, I should mention that this is, I believe, the last year that we're going to have like the COVID era players, the guys that receive that extra year of eligibility. That's something that kind of pairs in with Jaden Daniels, where you mentioned the Joe Burrow, who broke out his very last season. Jaden Daniels is getting quite a bit of cover, I think, for that in terms of, Burrow, broke out late, so maybe we can expect something similar to Jaden Daniels. I'm not quite as sure with him on that one because Burrow went and was the unquestioned number 1 overall pick with the way that he played, whereas with Daniels, there's still some questions. I mean, he was throwing touchdown passes to Brandon Ayuk at Arizona State, for crying out loud. And Ayuk's been in the league for 4 years now, something like that. Like Daniels has been doing the college game for a long time. How much of that is the talent around him and just him being so much more experienced? I mean, 1, 2, 3.
I mean, Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. was probably the best 1-2 receiving duo in college last year. Both guys over 1,000 yards. Both guys fast, both guys athletic. He was in the number 1 spot to succeed of any of these quarterbacks last year. That's what's making it tricky. How much is it him? How much is it the situation? My gut feeling says it's a little bit of both. I just think, like, obviously situation matters, but if you look at the rest of his college career, he wasn't all that effective. He wasn't very good at Arizona State. He wasn't very good even his previous year at LSU. He was getting better, but I think Kurt Warner, actually, to reference an analyst, Tom, I was watching NFL Network coverage, and that was Kurt Warner's question mark. Was this guy, did he have the career ear? Did everything just come together for him? Or was this, was it kind of like, I don't want to use the word one-hit wonder, but was it that one-hit wonder, that one season? Because every athlete has 1 year where it all comes together, where they play at a higher level than they really ever have for whatever reason it may be. So that's a big question mark for him. Drake May, real quick, I would say, Tom, too, is it the Sam Howell thing? Because Sam Howell had a really good second to last year. His last year, not as good at UNC. I know we don't want to compare to quarterbacks. I don't get caught up in the whole this USC quarterback, isn't going to be because USC QBs aren't good, Ohio State QBs aren't good. With that said, though, when I'm talking about the history of football, it's irrelevant. But if we're looking at modern quarterbacks in a similar system, we've had a couple of these big talents, Mitch Trubisky, Sam Howell, more modern guys, like much similar to what system that UNC has been running recently. And we haven't seen that success. And maybe that's part of the bias. And I usually don't, Tom.
I don't believe in helmet scouting, no.
But I think it is worthy to note that he didn't put up incredible college numbers. Obviously, it depends on who he has on his team. But Drake May, like, if you didn't follow
The difference between Drake May and Mitch Trubisky is that May has multiple seasons of starting, whereas Trubisky had one. The difference between
Sure.
Drake May and Sam Howell is draft position. Howell was what, like a round? What round was he? Like 4 or 5, something like
I'm
that.
not
Like
sure what round he was.
the difference is massive in both those
I
instances. Where I
think
don't
I
think there's enough to really draw
sure.
parallels between the
I'm
two
just
of
saying
them.
it's a little bit more modern. But my question for him is the accuracy, because I know we had Josh Allen was a fairly inaccurate
Sure.
quarterback in college. He got better. There's many guys that are inaccurate in college, though, that don't get
I
better.
think that's an improvable skill. I think that Drake May has the ability to improve upon that skill.
Okay.
The
Because
one
the
guy
big
where,
question for him is pocket presence. That's been the
yeah,
question mark for him. And not having that pocket presence could be really tough at the next level. So, Justin Herbert comparison, that's more of a best case to me
oh, of
personally.
course,
I
yeah.
don't think he hits that
I mean,
best
that's
case.
I mean that's what all these draft things are. It's like we're always reaching for like the high end of what somebody can be, because that's what the draft is essentially. The draft is hope, and I think that hope is what people are going to be putting in. Whoever drafts JJ McCarthy, they're going to hope that he's actually more talented than he had to display at Michigan. You know, that he's capable of being a guy that you can win because of potentially. I think his ceiling is probably that win with type of category. I'm not saying like not necessarily like a one-to-one in terms of like their abilities or their background or something like that, but if he ends up kind of in the mold of a Baker Mayfield type of quarterback, an Andy Dalton type of quarterback, where it's like he's going to put up some numbers,
I think
you can
I
play
I
and be a
think
contending
he'd be
playoff team with
fortunate
him.
to be
But
as good as those two guys.
well, that's what I'm saying. Like that's his ceiling in my book. It's like that's the type
Yeah.
of quarterback that we're going to be going with there.
If
I think
he's
he's
the fourth
probably going to
quarterback
be a
taken
bit,
and he reaches that ceiling, then it was a good draft pick. I don't personally
yeah.
think he's going to reach the Baker Mayfield and Andy Dalton ceiling, because those are two guys I personally have as underrated quarterbacks when I'm talking about,
They're
NFL
rated. They're fine.
quarterbacks.
They're a viable starting quarterback, but you're never going to assume that they're in that top win because of whatever. You know, like that's where I kind of associate JJ
I look at
McCarthy.
it, if you're
So
the fourth quarterback taken, and if you're right around an average NFL starting quarterback, like a top 16 guy, which is what Andy Dalton and Baker Mayfield are, for the fourth quarterback taken, even if you take him fourth or fifth, that's not bad. You're not doing
mhm.
bad. I'm not convinced that McCarthy is a top 16 starter. I've got him in my bottom 10 starters in the league personally. So
Okay,
I'm
so
just
kind of like
saying
that Jimmy G, maybe Derek Carr type of area where it's like, okay, like you're
worse,
there.
worse. I think Jimmy G and Derek Carr are right around that 16 number. I think he's clearly bottom half.
I think if we go through
But
the
I think
number of
that's what I
quarterbacks in
think
the
a lot. I
league,
think a lot of
we're
these
gonna
guys
have way
are
too many
like,
guys for 15
no, I know, but a
spots.
lot of these guys, Tom, are like Derek Carr. The guys that have really good games, but I
Mhm.
don't trust them consistently to lead my franchise. So I'm looking at like, where do I view Drake May, JJ McCarthy? Where do I view Jaden Daniels? I think Derek Carr is a prime example, because when Derek Carr is going good, he's got a great arm. When he's playing at his best, he's easily a top 5 or 10 quarterback. The problem is that he's often a bottom 5 or 10 quarterback. So Derek Carr is kind of like the perfect example of kind of where I group these quarterbacks. The question for them is, can they consistently put it together? My gut feeling, Tom, says no, except for Caleb Williams.
What does your gut say about Bo Nix and Michael Penix, the next two quarterbacks that are being talked about as potential first round picks? And yet, if you look at just the pure talent evaluation, for example, Brugler has them as second to third round talents. That sounds a lot to me like overdrafting might be taking place. Particularly, you look at teams like, say, the Denver Broncos.
The
You look
Raiders.
at the Las Vegas Raiders as potential options, where this is where teams start to make mistakes a lot of times, as they say, hey, this is probably the cheapest we're going to be able to get a young quarterback in here, and not necessarily looking at the talent and the ability. As again, these are two older quarterback prospects. I believe Nick's currently 24. Penix is 23, 24 as of the draft guide that I'm looking at. So these guys are going to be older prospects going in. And again, benefiting from having that COVID year. I believe 5 years of quarterback play for Bo Nix, 6 actually for Michael Penix, although he also has injury exemptions in there as well, which kind of extended his career going from Indiana to Washington. So a couple of guys that kind of bloomed lately as far as being good. Do they fall kind of in that same category of, all right, they've been around long enough that they ought to be putting up these numbers because they're going up against 18 and 19 and 20-year-olds? Or do you think that there is any sort of projection where these guys can be more than, say, a Jarrett Stidham, more than, say, an Aiden O'Connell, kind of placeholder guys that, for a season or two, you can get like a Gardner Minshew out of them if you're lucky? Do you think those guys can even reach that, if not a bit
Yeah.
higher? Or do you think that this is pretty much going to be like they're going to get picked, they're going to go out in flames, maybe if they're fortunate they can stick around as backups for a few years?
Well, I think if you're looking for a guy that you want to reach on, Tom, is you want to say overstep your bounds, a guy that you want to be like a steal quarterback in this draft, I think it's Michael Penix Jr. because he
Sure.
does have pretty good talent. I think you watch a lot of evaluators. The biggest question mark for him is the injuries. He's been hurt multiple times. He's lost some mobility. What if he gets hurt again? That's a big question mark for him. But you look at the arm talent, the zip on the ball. Michael Penix is a guy, in my opinion, like I said earlier, I would be looking at Michael Penix at the same level of a J.J. McCarthy personally, and you can get him a lot lower for a lot less money. That's the guy I would personally reach for if you want to look at your franchise quarterback. Both of these guys are very, very interesting, kind of like in the Jaden Daniels fold, because Bo Nix, by the way, Tom, we had this trivia question months ago on our program. He started more college games than any quarterback in the history of college football. You look at his time at Auburn, which
It's
isn't
like a
necessarily
Crash
a
Davis kind of distinction. Are you
right.
familiar with the movie Bull Durham?
Yeah,
Yeah, and Kevin Costner's character Crash Davis is like,
sure,
congrats, you are the all-time leader in minor league home runs, which is a kind of a backhanded compliment because like you have the most home
sure,
runs of somebody who's not quite good enough to make it to the show. That's what it
sure.
feels like with Bo Nix to me.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, so Bo Nix, 16 touchdowns, 12 and 11 at Auburn. Then he goes for 29 at Oregon. Then he goes for 45 at almost double the yards, 77.4 completion percentage, but a lot of screen passes, a lot of short passes, part of the Oregon offense. Michael Penix was getting 10 touchdowns, 14 at Indiana. Then he goes up to 31 and 36. So this is the question marks with these guys. Were they good because of the system? Were they good because they're older? The coaches, it's tough to measure. I mean, look, Bo Nix, you want to talk about a ceiling? He doesn't have the strongest arm, Bo Nix, but he's a good athlete. He's a good, accurate guy. He makes smart decisions. So, I mean, Drew Brees didn't have a good arm. He was a second round pick. Obviously, I'm not going to say he's going to be anywhere near Drew Brees, but I think
Lander.
Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr., like I mentioned, if you get them in the late first round or second round, that are good investment pieces. I think these guys, like I said earlier, are closer to May Daniels than McCarthy, than May Daniels and McCarthy are to Caleb Williams. There's a couple other quarterbacks, too, that are really interesting for me, Tom. Spencer Rattler out of
Mm-hmm.
Oklahoma, who was the starting quarterback that Caleb Williams replaced. Got a big arm, big recruit, big talent. He was okay at South Carolina, not great, but not bad. I mean, South Carolina is not really, the premier place for quarterbacks that you think of. And then the other guy is Joe Milton out of Tennessee, who's got a massive arm. He can throw it a mile, but his accuracy leaves a lot to be desired. So there's some guys in this draft, like Joe Milton, for example. He could have easily a better career than Jaden Daniels. Like Bo Nix, Michael Penix, they could have a better career if they're in the right spot. I think Bo Nix and Michael Penix are, especially Bo Nix, a little bit more of a system quarterback. I think if he plays in a really good system, he could be really good. If he plays in a really bad system, he could be really bad. Kind of like Geno Smith. I think that's where I group a lot of these quarterbacks. A lot of these guys are probably average starting quarterbacks in the league. But if they're in the right system, they look like Geno Smith with the Seahawks. If they're in the
Mm-hmm.
wrong system, they look like Geno Smith with the Jets, because that's the prototypical average NFL quarterback, Geno Smith. We've seen him look terrible. We've also seen him look above average. So it depends on what system he plays in. I don't think any one of these guys is necessarily consistent enough or talented enough to be, a really, really good quarterback, a Pro Bowler type quarterback for multiple seasons. But I would say if there's one guy that you would reach on that might be worth a chance, I would say Michael Penix Jr., because he's got a big arm. He's got a big arm. He's got big talent. He definitely has the experience that you mentioned. So that's a guy to look out for, Tom. But I'm not saying that we have a Drew Brees or a Brett Favre here, a second-round pick that goes on to have a Hall of Fame career.
Yeah, I think these guys are going to have the unfortunate distinction of being overdrafted, and therefore everyone's expectations are going to be set way too high. If this is something where they were to be picked up in, say, like the second round, let's just say like the LA Rams picking at 52, if they were to get Penix or Bonix, obviously these guys are going to be long gone by that point. But that's the sort of situation where these guys would actually perhaps benefit a little bit. I think they're going to be put in bad spots, as we'll probably be talking about after the draft. I agree with you.
The Raiders and
Spencer
Broncos.
Rattler, he would be my guy that I would say he's a tier below Bo Nix and Michael Penix, but I think that just on landing spot, you look at the talent, he's kind of got the questions of, okay, where's his head at? Because the physical tools are there. We saw him do that at the collegiate level,
Turnovers.
But we also saw him kind of have, some questionable, I'm trying to think of the way to put it, because
decisions on the field.
Decisions on the field where he's just not necessarily always on top of his game. That's something where if he ends up going, say, end of round 2, maybe like the Dallas Cowboys are saying, hey, we want to start developing a contingency plan for the Dak Prescott contract situation. If we don't want to go and pay a ton of money to him, for example, or maybe if Detroit's looking for an off-ramp from the Jared Goff experience and they want to be able to have that succession plan in place, that's where these guys can go to have some success. I don't necessarily think they'll end up there, unfortunately, for them. But I think we've talked plenty of quarterback. There's another position that has a lot of equity in that top 10 range. We've got Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, Roma Dunze as pretty much the consensus 1, 2, 3 wide receivers. If you look based on talent, they all have top 10 talent. These are guys that are definitely going to kind of break the mold. I mean, if this weren't let's just say if the Bears had more success with Justin Fields, we would be talking about the first overall pick being a wide receiver for the first time since Keyshawn Johnson. That's how good a lot of talent evaluators are saying Marvin Harrison Jr. is. And I've heard the knocks of well, what if his name were something other than Marvin Harrison Jr. If he doesn't have that Hall of Fame name attached as a result of his dad being.
I think it helps him though. I really do. Again, he's a
really?
great player.
You think so? I guess that's the question. For me, I everything that I'm looking at and seeing is if not for Caleb Williams, this guy would be the best overall player in the draft, and maybe he's the best overall player regardless of Caleb Williams, and kind of that that positional value bump that Williams is going to get. That if we're saying, hey, if we're just going pure talent, a lot of folks say Marvin Harrison Jr. number 1 overall. Do you think that how close do you think he is with Malik Neighbors? I'll put it this way: do you put them on the same line, or do you have them a tier apart? Because I have them a tier apart as far as Harrison Jr.'s playability and just overall production in college and what they can do at the pro level.
Yeah, I put him closer to the same tier. I would mark Marvin Harrison Jr. number 1 ahead of him. I mean, I think numbers are hard. Obviously, at Ohio State, he didn't have Jaden Daniels. He had a lesser quarterback. A lot of teams are focused in on him. So numbers isn't the only way to look at this. I mean, his numbers were massive. Back-to-back years of 1,200-plus receiving yards and 14 touchdown catches. But if you want to talk about numbers, I mean, Malik Neighbors had 1,569 receiving yards, also 14 touchdowns. Roma Dunze had more than both with 1,640 yards. So, it's hard projecting to the next level. I know Marvin Harrison is, probably a little bit faster than Neighbors, maybe a little bit taller. He is skinnier, though, but like his father. So I would lean, my gut feeling is saying that Neighbors, Harrison Jr., and Odunze are all on that same tier, with Harrison being number one, but it's like 1, 2, and 3. I'm not quite saying 1A, and 1B, but I think it's not a massive level. I mean, production-wise, Neighbors and Odunze were better this last year. Better, quarterback play obviously helps them a long way. I like Marvin Harrison Jr. a lot because he's tall, he's strong, he's built well. I do want to see some separation, though, for him. Had a big game against Georgia, obviously 106 yards and 2 touchdowns in the CFP after getting hurt in the third quarter, I think, in that game. But, I mean, I think Neighbors and Odunze are both really good. Odunze, I think, is even a little bit underrated because I think he's up there with Neighbors. A lot of scouts have said Harrison 1, Neighbors 2, Odunze 3. But I look at Odunze's size, how strong he is. That dude in the red zone, Tom Casselman, oh my God. He's going to be a beast in the red zone. I mean, I'm a Bear fan. I look at DJ Moore, I look at Keenan Allen. These guys are great route runners. They're great, speed guys. But if the Bears can get Odunze at number 9 and really go all in on Caleb Williams, he would be a great red zone target, in my opinion. So all 3 guys are good. Neither one of them has any massive weaknesses. I think Odunze is probably the slowest of the 3. But Harrison and Neighbors are really, really good receivers. I'm looking at all these guys that have a potential to put on the gold jackets. I mean, obviously, there's a long way to go. We got to see them stay healthy. We got to see them at the next level. But I don't really see why these guys would not be, number 1 receivers, why these guys wouldn't be on that Hall of Fame trajectory. I mean, I think I'd even throw Brock Bowers in that receiver mix. He's the tight end, but he's really good. Obviously, we've seen tight ends. We saw the conference championship games, Kittle, Laporta, Kelsey, Andrews coming off an injury, the best tight ends playing deep in the draft. I think Brian Thomas Jr. for LSU, another big recruit, 4.33 speed. He also had more than 1,000 receiving yards this last season. So I know we'll talk about the sleeper receivers in the next segment, but I think all of these guys are can't miss. Where I'm a little bit hesitant on the quarterbacks, I'm very hesitant outside of Caleb Williams to say this guy's going to be the real deal. I think Neighbors, Odunze, and Marvin Harrison, we're talking about multi-Pro Bowls and likely for all of them Hall of Fame careers. I mean, it's really hard to project, but if you told me Hall of Fame or not going into the draft, I would project all those receivers to be Hall of Fame, those 3, because the talent is there. These guys put up incredible numbers. I kind of like to look at a combo of the numbers you put up in college, but also how you project at the next level. Are you fast? Are you strong? Are you a good route runner? These guys have that perfect combo of they delivered in college and they have all the tools to deliver at the next level. So all these top 3 receivers are fantastic. I'm a little bit torn between Neighbors and Odunze. Like, who's number 2? I think it's like if Harrison's 1, those guys are 2 in 2A. You can't go wrong with either. So love this receiving class. And there's a lot of other really good guys, too, you can pick up in the late first round or the second round, which we'll talk about here in a little bit as well. But I will say this, Tom, it's not a knock against Marvin Harrison Jr. I think he'd be a great recruit, even if that wasn't his dad. But I think we don't really talk about receivers getting picked number 1 overall. That doesn't really happen.
Yeah.
And there was a sort of discussion around that at one point, last year. And I do think his draft profile is boosted by his dad's name. It's not taking anything away from his pedigree, but it would be very hard to say that it's not drafted, not boosted by your dad's name. I mean, Marvin Harrison Sr., Tom, one of 2 guys in NFL history that is top 5 all-time in catches and top 5 all-time in receiving touchdowns. It's Marvin Harrison and Jerry Rice. That's the list. He's also top 10 all-time in receiving yards. He is without question a top 10 receiver of all time. You look at what he did, and his son is, by the way, more physically gifted. His son is faster. He's, taller. He's more built. So it's kind of hard not to attach that, name and not boost the player even more than you should. I do
Mhm.
think Caleb Williams, for me, I think he is the best prospect, in my opinion, given his position, given what he does. Like if I was giving draft grades out there, I would still put Caleb Williams 1, probably Marvin Harrison Jr. 2, as far as the best players in this draft.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly how Dane Brugler has him, and then he has Malik Neighbors at 3, and that's I think really a testament to how good Neighbors has been. I mean, you look at a couple of things of what's going to make a good professional wide receiver. You need to have an early breakout typically in your career. Neighbors had that as a sophomore, as did Marvin Harrison Jr. For Roma Dunze, he didn't really break out till his junior year, although he gets a bit of a pass because freshman year was that COVID season. So I
Sure.
think he's definitely still talented where, he's probably going to be the exception to some rules as far as, okay, like, are you going to be an all pro receiver if, you've broken out late as a collegiate player type of thing. I think he gets a little bit of a pass in the evaluation from a historical perspective of checking that box
Sure.
because of that really unique circumstance. But yeah, these are three guys that, I mean, if any one of them falls to the Bears at 9, or maybe the Bears might be up at 8, depending on what the NFL decides for the Atlanta Falcons and the Kirk Cousins tampering
Tampering. Absolutely.
investigation that's going on. I mean, that's something that I don't know if we really have time to talk about it. Maybe that'll be in place of statement of the week. I'll just have like a short little blurb about that because that could be something that really, really impacts this draft.
Corruption
But
Casselman.
well, it's a fascinating thing because we've
You
seen it
love the
happen
corruption.
with we've seen it happen before with the Miami Dolphins and the Tom Brady and Sean Payton stuff. We saw it last year with the Arizona Cardinals and Shane Steichen and the Eagles and all the compensation that goes on there. But yeah, as far as these receivers go, I mean, these guys are all top 10 pedigree and would certainly be number one receivers in almost any other draft within recent memory. Except this year, they just all happen to be bunched up together and stacked together because they're such phenomenal talents. Brock Bowers, as you mentioned, he's somebody where we're going to kind of talk about him as a wide receiver in quotes because he was the primary passing weapon at a Georgia program that won back-to-back titles. Like he's a phenomenal player through and through, a quick healer, quote, if you can call somebody that you can give somebody credit. He had like a tightrope
Sure.
ankle surgery earlier in the season and then still came back, which I think is impressive. I know that part of the motivation for coming back is that at the time Georgia was still in contention for making the college football playoff and going on to win a national championship. But when you're looking at somebody at that caliber of talent, it would also be easier. It would be understandable to look at them and say, okay, I get it. If you say I had the surgery, I'm going to focus on recovery because I'm going pro next
Kind of
year,
like Jalen
and
Waddle
I'm
came
going.
back and played in the national championship game for
Yeah,
Alabama a couple years ago when you didn't
exactly.
have
Yeah,
to.
yeah. Didn't have to. But playing for a national championship, if it's like okay, you're going to go play for like the you know Cheez It Bowl or whatever, the Popeyes Bowl, whatever smaller program or smaller situation, I could understand you saying like, I'm a basically like an
I'm a Leonard
archetypical
Fournette this.
top of the line tight end. I mean, he's somebody where we're really fortunate to see tight ends breaking out last season. You usually don't see rookie tight ends having a ton of success, and yet Dalton
Laporta.
Kincaid, Sam Laporta, both had phenomenal rookie seasons. Kind of bucking a bit of a trend. Usually, guys take a year or two. I think even like Travis Kelsey, his rookie year wasn't really phenomenal, so it took him even like a year to get good.
Hey, it's
Brock
tight ends
Bowers
are
has a
cool
chance to
now.
come in.
That's what Brock Bowers said
Yeah,
about Kelsey and Swift's relationship. Good for the tight end, right? The
yeah.
position
Well,
is
I mean,
getting
tight ends
bigger
are
and bigger,
so
Tom.
important. Well, it's so important because you look at kind of the modern NFL offense, and you look at Sean McVay, you look at Andy Reid, you look at Kyle Shanahan. Why do all of their offenses work so incredibly well? Because you have a tight end that can do multiple things. I know the knock on Brock Bowers is a little bit on the smaller side of things. I think he's like slightly smaller than Travis Kelsey is, and Kelsey not necessarily like a great blocker, but I think he doesn't get enough credit for being serviceable in that role. I think Brock Bowers has a
It,
chance to jump in
he
right away and be like,
doesn't play small if you watched his games last year. I'll tell you
he's
that.
going to be I think I hesitate to say like the next because we did see such a good season from Sam Laporta and Dalton Kincaid, but like Travis Kelsey is mid-30s. George Kittle is early 30s. Mark Andrews is approaching that 30 number. I mean, I think that the tight end position is in very, very good hands with these guys coming out. I think Brock Bowers is going to be a slam dunk. The only reason he might slip down boards a little bit is because quarterbacks are gonna get artificially inflated. The receivers are so good, and like you said, there's some top offensive line talent as well. So it just might be that there's too many positions at more premium spots than tight
Yeah,
end.
he could be a top 5 pick if it was like a weak draft,
Yeah,
but
top
he's
or if teams simply said we don't necessarily care about what a position's value is on some sort of hypothetical chart.
sure.
I just want to get good quality football players. I think if teams just drafted solely based off of that, he'd be phenomenal. Like I think he'd fit in great at LA with the Chargers. I just think they're going to look at him and say we have too many other needs before getting a
I
tight
think they're
end
gonna
on
look
our
at
team.
Marvin Harrison Jr. or Malik Neighbors and be like, "That's who we need for our young quarterback," right?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
So that will be. Let's see. I lost my place.
You have the
Okay,
sleeper
so other
receivers.
receiver sleepers in this draft. I mean, I think a good one to keep an eye on. And again, I'm slightly tinted. My views tinted by the fact that I do play dynasty fantasy football, so I'm consuming a lot of stuff about the incoming rookies. But Lad McConkey out of Georgia is somebody that I
Yeah.
think could probably like can outperform like the Texas guys like Adonai Mitchell, Xavier Worthy, as far as, he might not necessarily have the super fast profile. But I think a lot of teams are going to start looking at guys who can be the next Puka Nacua type of thing, where
Wes
it's like, okay,
Welker.
you might not have like the best measurables, but can you run good, clean routes? And can you be tough? And I think Lad McConkey can do those things. He's a bit of a sleeper. I think Ricky Pearsall out of Florida, not necessarily any great college production, but to be fair, he played a couple of seasons with Anthony Richardson, who was developmental as a passing prospect, to say the least. I mean,
Sure.
he's drafted basically all on projection and upside, and we certainly saw that at the collegiate level. So I think Pearsall also fits into that role of, okay, he can play in the slot. He's just going to get to a spot where he can be open and be your quarterback's best friend, your quarterback's a security blanket. I mean, I'll say this: it's tough to pick like quote sleepers in this draft because there are so many good guys. I mean, you look at an Adonai Mitchell and Xavier Worthy and like the fantastic seasons that they had at Texas. I mean, these are guys that are probably going to be first rounders, but they might be a bit higher up if not for all the other receiving talent at the top. Just scrolling down or seeing if there's anybody else that I kind of like later
There's a few
on.
guys I have.
Yeah, go
I
for it.
mean, I think Xavier Worthy, I normally don't get caught up in the combine. I do think that,
Mm-hmm.
speed when you're running without pads, I normally think it's overrated, but then I look at 4.21, the NFL record. It's hard not to notice. And then I look at that. Well, is he just a fast guy? Can he produce? Well, we had more than 1,000 receiving yards at Texas last year, a team that had multiple good receivers. You mentioned his teammate. It's not like a program where they key in on just one guy. So the numbers, more than 1,000, not like 1,500 or 1,600 like neighbors, but like with having other number 2, number 3 options on that team. So he's a guy. I think the Chiefs are kind of looking at him. He's kind of looked at the Chiefs. They want to use him like a Tyreek Hill if they were able to get him. In a dream world for me, obviously some Rashi Rice off the field question marks. But even if
Mm-hmm.
Rashi Rice is there, even if Hollywood Brown works out, he's starting to enter that stage where he's going to get a little bit older in a couple of years. Having that fast receiver never hurts. I think if he ends up being in Kansas City, that's a team that's going to figure out how to use him, Xavier Worthy. That's just a pipeline, a dream as a Kansas City Chief and Bear fan. Would love to see the
Mm-hmm.
Chiefs get him. He's kind of projected as like the 7th best receiver. If you look at mock drafts, there's different ones. Some might have him 6, some might have him 8. But if we're talking about a guy that had more than 1,000 yards and is on paper the fastest receiver in this draft, you got to take notice of Xavier Worthy. I think there's a couple other guys. Again, I look at production a little bit different than maybe Xavier Worthy as an example. Maybe these guys don't have all the measurables as far as, speed, all these other things. But I think Troy Franklin had 1,383 receiving yards last year, 14 touchdown passes. Did he play in a good system to benefit him? Absolutely. But 1,383 receiving yards and 14 touchdowns, that's no joke. That's the same amount of touchdowns as Marvin Harrison Jr. and more receiving yards. He'll be a second or third round guy, sixth in the country in receiving yards last season. That could be a good pick for you. And one of the most interesting guys in this draft, I think, would be Xavier Legette out of South Carolina. He was eighth in receiving yards last year, Tom, 1,255. And he's the guy that, as you were talking about earlier, benefited out of that fifth-year COVID system. A guy that, quite frankly, had done close to nothing up until his last year he just played. These numbers came out of nowhere. So I look at this like, if you're looking for a steal, was this guy a late bloomer? Was this a one-hit wonder? Maybe. But what if he is a late bloomer? If he improved that much last year, how much more is he going to improve in the NFL? Because this dude kind of came out of nowhere for some massive numbers. So that's a potential guy, a late bloomer guy to keep in mind. Xavier Legette out of South Carolina.
Yeah, he's going to be, and I don't.
He's a big guy too, physical. Maybe he's not fast enough, but he's built physical. A guy that could probably get you a lot of, jump balls, a lot of red zone positions. Box out like that Buffalo Wild Wings commercial. Box out. He'll box some dudes out.
That late bloomer profile type of thing. This is more of like an ESPN draft coverage criticism I had of kind of the overindulgence of tragic storytelling. I mean, part of the reason why maybe he was a late bloomer. I'm not sure if you're familiar with his story at all, but I believe, I pulled it up here. Unfortunately, both parents passed away before he even played college football. I believe there was also a car accident or a motorcycle incident early on in his collegiate career. So that could be the type of thing where, as far as the human interest aspect, I'm really pulling for him no matter where he 100%. Goes. Because that's the type of, it's just a great story of how sport can help you overcome in many instances and how you can still achieve great things. I just hope that I hope ESPN doesn't lean too far into it, because I know that's something that they like to do with their draft coverage, where it's just hey, here's this really exciting player. Now we're going to tell you about the worst, part of their lives type of thing.
Well, if you think about it though, Tom, that's a guy that's playing with the chip on his shoulder, and a guy that, like you mentioned, why did he late bloom? Well, if you have physical, mental, and emotional things going on, we're talking about a teenage kid, someone that's barely, maybe even 20 years old, roughly a teenager. That definitely does affect the way you're going to play. So he's a very interesting guy to look out for, maybe in that third round. You're not necessarily saying he's a Pro Bowl receiver. Maybe he is, but a solid physical number two. If things work out for him, that could be a really good sleeper later in this draft.
Absolutely. And then or a set of positions, really, if you think of the offensive line as one unit, a position that is always overlooked, are the big guys who basically make it all happen for the quarterbacks that we like to laud so much, to third of the receivers that we like to ogle at the amazing catches that they make. Well, none of that happens without the big guys in the trenches. My favorite type of guys to watch. I do recommend not necessarily every play when you're watching the NFL, but sometimes just watch the line. Just watch the offensive, defensive line. The camera will take you to where the ball is going to end up. But watch what happens in the trench. That is going to be some very, very interesting stuff. This is a draft where you can find a lot of really, really good players. I mean, Joe Alt, the left tackle out of Notre Dame, he's been basically locked into the Tennessee Titans at 7 overall. A guy that I thought maybe made a mistake going back to school, Ola Fashanu out of Penn State. I thought he was, based on all the draft profiles that I was reading, he was a top 5 talent last season.
He probably actually got worse from what I was seeing about him. A little bit less productive this year. His draft stock, given with him being slightly less productive in this,
And the
great
quarterback's
talent this
rising up.
year,
Yeah.
his draft status is going to go down. Actually,
Yeah, you've got J.C. Latham out of Alabama looking to buck a fairly negative trend of Alabama offensive linemen in the NFL. Not typically a strong result there. I know, like, again, helmet scouting, but it is a trend that we have seen. So he's going to look to buck that. Troy Fatanu out of Washington, a team that made it to the
you
championship
haven't
game. So
mentioned
there's a
my
lot.
second best guy yet.
Second best guy.
Second best offensive lineman in the draft, if not
I
the best.
I know I mentioned Olufashano.
No,
Who
I
who
think
who
I
do you
think
have?
he's projected to be the third best, maybe, but I
Hmm.
think I've got him at number two. Talisi Fuaga out of Oregon State. He did not allow a
17th
sack.
overall, fourth tackle, according to
Yeah, that's what I'm
Burglar. But
saying.
yeah, he's still really good.
What I saw had him projected as third.
Hmm.
Whatever. Some places put him third, some put him fourth. But he did not allow a sack the last 2 years at Oregon State,
Hmm.
playing in a really good Pac-12, which, looks like that's getting disbanded, but the Pac-12 had a phenomenal season.
Yeah.
You know me, Tom, I love stats. If you don't allow a sack in 2 years, holy cow, that is wildly impressive for him. So he's kind of my number
Hmm.
two guy. Number one guy, you look at all the measurables, you look at the grades, it has got to be Joe Alt. Notre Dame talent, Pro Football Focus grades him over 90
Hmm.
each of the last 2 seasons with the Fighting Irish. Big dude, multiple years of proven success. He'll be a
Oh
top
yeah.
10 pick and will protect any quarterback. I think Tennessee, is where he is projected.
Hmm.
But if somebody reaches for him, if something doesn't work out there, he'll be a top 10 pick. And he's one of the most sure things in this draft, Joe Alt. Talisi Fuaga is my number two guy to look out for. Like I mentioned, did not allow a sack the last 2 years. I kind of look at these guys that did it for multiple seasons. These two guys in particular had two massive seasons back to back. They're going to be really, really good offensive linemen at the next level. I do have J.C. Latham, Tom, out of Alabama. He's actually only 21 years old. He played against some of the best teams in the SEC, played Michigan, Texas in the non-conference. But it's important to note that a lot of these prospects are 22, 23. He's
Hmm.
extra young. So you look at him at the next level, he's got even more room for growth. We're talking about the Michael Penix, Bo Nix, the 24, 25-year-olds. Well, this kid is 21. J.C. Latham is going to be a really, really good offensive lineman. Those are probably my top three I've written down. I kind of looked at various things online, but I'm a big production guy. And Fuaga has the production out of Oregon State. This is a guy that might be a massive steal in this draft. He's looking at 17th. You had him projected according to your guy. I've seen him a little bit lower. I think the guy that you have
Hmm.
projects him a little bit lower. But yeah, most outside the top 10, mid
Yeah.
first round, give or take. That's a guy that is going to protect your quarterback for 10, 15 years.
Hmm.
Talisi Fuaga, Joe Alt, those two in particular, Tom,
Yeah.
are going to
And
be massive offensive linemen.
just like a quick clarification, the way that Dane Brugler does things is he does this. He's not doing a mock draft. He's just saying this is in order how talented the players are. So, for example, he has Fuaga at 17. He's JJ McCarthy's the 21st best player. Obviously, because he's a
Yeah.
quarterback, he's going to be drafted higher. But yeah,
I
I
think your
agree.
guy's
Like,
sleeping on Fuaga a little bit. A lot of the places I have him as the third best. Some had him at number two. So
fourth
the fact that your
tackle.
guy has him at four, I don't know. I know you
Yeah.
like your guy, but I think Fuaga's getting slept
Yeah,
on by your boy.
he's absolutely not infallible with grading these guys out. But I mean, for me, I would say, like, yeah, Joe Alt's the clear number one. I prefer Olufashano
Okay.
as the second
I like
tackle.
mine Talisi Fuaga. Fun name to go
Yeah,
different.
no, there's a lot of good talent, particularly at the top of the draft. That's another quick little thing when we're talking about sleepers. The reason why we're kind of keeping it to like first, second round type of guys is in no small part because this is widely considered to be a fairly shallow draft. That typically, I think the turning point is right around end of the fourth round, early fifth round is where we basically see, like, from that point on, a lot of these guys would be, quote, priority undrafted free agents in other years. This is a thinner draft than we typically see, but top heavy as
And
far as
there's going to
talent
be some
goes.
guy that shocks the world, a
Well,
Brock Purdy,
always.
a Tom Brady. There's
There's
always going
always
to be a
that. I mean,
guy that we
if
just
it,
don't know about, Tom. I hope it's Cody Schrader from Mizzou, a guy that put up
sure.
massive college numbers, a smaller guy, a guy that may go undrafted, may go 7th round, 6th round. Selfishly, as a Mizzou fan, as a Mizzou grad, as someone who's covered Mizzou Tiger sports in my past, that's my dream sleeper, Cody Schrader.
There you
Maybe
go.
I'll talk about him in our next show, the steal of the draft. Who's that
Yeah.
guy that
Well,
was not wanted by a D1 team? No D1 team wanted him, played at Truman State, went on to finish, top 10 in Heisman voting last season, hoping for Cody Schrader, which transitions to our running back.
exactly. Let's just talk about running backs now.
I don't have him written down here as far as a top 2 or 3 running back, but I think he could be a guy that, is maybe the number 2 back on your team. If you get him in the 7th round, you're doing pretty darn good. Talking about shallow drafts that are not considered on paper to be good. Running back has kind of already been going downhill for a lot of people, although Jahmyr Gibbs, Bijan Robinson were first-round picks last year, both delivered. On paper, there's no first-round talent at running back. Nobody's projected to get picked in the first round. I know somebody might reach, Tom, but all the drafts I've seen, we're looking at 2nd round for the first running back taken.
Yeah,
you have something different?
No, you'd have to pay 1,600. It's minus 1,600 for a running back not selected in the first round for no
so
RBs.
exactly.
You get,
we're not going to see a first round running back. I'm going to go over some of the best guys.
We might not see a second round.
Yeah,
we might not see a second round running back. I mean, just looking at some of the top guys. I mean, we've got Jonathan Brooks coming off of a knee injury.
Number 1.
He's probably going to be the first guy currently. Yeah. He is the favorite to go number 1 overall and fits right within locks of the week. So a little hint, nudge there. We've got Blake Corum, of course, national championship running back. Trey Benson, Jalen Wright, Marshawn Lloyd out of USC. But yeah, looking at these draft profiles, I've got all the top guys here. By the way, Cody Schrader, 14th running back. Overall 5th to 6th round grade.
Oh, okay, drafted. Okay.
Yeah, drafted,
okay.
yeah. 5th to 6th round.
So that'll be a steal. Grade. Yeah, that's what I read, Tom. I read 6th or 7th round for Cody Schrader. I like him.
Yeah, so actually, I mean, 5th or 6th, that's actually a little bit higher. But yeah, what I'm looking at a lot here is Jonathan Brooks is graded out as a 2nd to 3rd round player, and I just see a bunch of 3rd to 4th. Like, this is not a good running back class. The NFL told us that when we saw DeAndre Swift, Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, Austin Eckler, all these guys getting paid, getting some, for running backs at least, decent contracts. Josh Jacobs, Aaron Jones.
A lot of running backs on the move. A lot of these teams said, let's get our running back in free agency.
There's nothing to be gained, really, in the draft. Like, you might be able to hit on a later pick, get a diamond in the rough type of thing, get a running back in the right system, the right situation to thrive. But certainly the NFL is saying, hey, if we're paying free agent money to running backs, that means that these guys in the draft aren't very good.
Yeah, I think, though, Jonathan Brooks, I do like him. I think he's a guy that, is going to be a little bit of a steal in the 2nd or 3rd round. I mean, he's a guy that sat behind Bijan Robinson for a couple years. So the numbers weren't really there his first couple of years. But you look at this last season in a Texas offense that, again, has multiple receivers, multiple running backs, put up 1,139 rush yards, 6.1 yards per carry. I always look at running backs. Can they do both? Because the modern running back, you got to receive and run. Had 6.1 yards per carry, 286 receiving yards out of the backfield for Texas. So he's a guy that I think it could be a very solid running back. I think he is the number 1 back in this draft, hands down. I don't love Blake Corum as a pro prospect. I know he was coming off an injury. His numbers dipped this last season. Played on a great offensive line. Doesn't really have the NFL breakaway speed, Blake Corum, which could hurt him. So I don't really look at him as a really good NFL prospect per se. I know Jalen Wright out of Tennessee, 4.38 40 time, very fast guy. More than 7 yards per carry last year in the tough SEC, more than 1,000 rushing yards. That's probably the number 2 back
That's what
in
I
this
think. Yeah.
draft. Jalen Wright, given the speed, the athleticism, the combo, he's a really good guy at number 2. Again, probably a second or third round pick. I'm not saying he's going to be a great running back, but if you can get guys like, Brooks and Wright in the second round or the third round, I think you're doing pretty good. I'm not saying massive steal, but I think you'll get a better player than their pick will dictate, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Then obviously I would love to see selfishly Cody Schrader out of Mizzou. I mean, 14th best running back. I look at the college numbers. Statistically, he was maybe the best running back in college football last year in a tough SEC conference. So he's a guy that you got to really look out for. Maybe as like a 5th or 6th best running back in the 5th, 6th, 7th round. But yeah, I agree with you. I agree with the analysis. I know sometimes we want to overthink things. Stats don't translate, but you kind of put it really well in that the entire NFL in this off season, like teams will miss somebody, teams will miss positions. But if the entire league is telling you there's no good running backs, they might miss on one, maybe they miss on 2, but we're not going to have like 5 or 6 Hall of Fame running backs out of this draft. That much is obvious.
I don't know if we'll even
Probably
get
have
one.
0. Probably have 0.
Yeah, I mean, and that's and unfortunately that's just kind of part of how the NFL is just shifted stylistically, where we're not really gonna see a ton of running backs, just like how in baseball we're probably not going to see a 300 game winner. Not that that's really a super indicative thing, other than
see
longevity.
One more, Justin Verlander will power through. 43 to more to go. Let's go, 41-year-old Justin Verlander. Let's go, Justin. Let's go, Justin.
I'll take the under on that. A couple other guys that I'm looking at and thinking, okay, it could be interesting. Tyrone Tracy out of Purdue. He is a converted wide receiver to running back. So if you're looking for somebody who could kind of be like an Antonio Gibson type of player,
Mizzou,
he could be. No, I said Purdue.
I know, but I have a Mizzou here.
Oh, there you go.
For Cody
and
Schrader.
Then Isaac Guerrero from Louisville. Not really a ton of production, but looking at kind of like his style of running and numbers, wouldn't surprise me if he's a little bit of like an Isaiah Pacheco type of guy who is a late round pick. Let me just read this up real quick. Overall, Guerrero doesn't have an impressive body of work, but his build, explosiveness, and ability on passing down suggests his NFL resume will far outshine what he did in college if he can stay healthy, because I know that is something that he has
one
faced
of my favorite draft reports ever in the history of football. I read what the Chiefs had written down for Pacheco, and they said this guy had such a bad offensive line. He had such bad blocking in college that we couldn't actually get a good eye for how good he is. But we just said, let's just take him anyway and find out.
Yeah, he was like, what, 7th round pick or something like that? That's exactly what you do with that pick.
The Chiefs, who are very good at evaluating talent, they do a great job of drafting all these great 2nd, 3rd, 4th round, in his case, 7th round pick. Their draft analysis on Pacheco was he was in such a bad system that we think he's actually better than the numbers. So something to think about. There's always going to be a diamond in the rough, obviously, for a running back, especially if you don't have an offensive line. Life can be hard.
And if you don't have a defense, that's going to make life kind of difficult for your offense, having to play catch up all the time, as we talked about with Caleb Williams and the USC Trojans. So let's talk a little bit of defense. I know like a lot of the big names, a lot of the big talent in this draft is at the offensive side of things. I mean, again, going off the Dane Brugler thing, we don't get our first defensive player
like 9,
until I believe
8, 9, depending on which draft
overall,
you're looking at.
10th overall, Terrian Arnold out of Alabama, the cornerback.
See, your guy has him. See, I looked at different mock drafts, and the guy that most places have as the first pick is actually Dallas Turner out of defense.
Based on positional value, Dallas Turner is very likely to be the first overall pick on the defensive side of the ball, just because pass rusher is the second most prized position.
8th to Atlanta. Is Atlanta 8th?
As of right now, but again,
as of right now,
I
think I saw him I know the Bears would consider him too, as well as
The Bears, yeah,
Jared
Dallas,
Verse as well.
Jared Verse. Thank you. I was
Yeah,
mixing up my edge rushers. I mean, somebody that I am keeping a keen eye on is he's been kind of flying up mock drafts is Byron Murphy the second out of Texas. I mean, if we think about kind of probably the not even probably the best Bears team that you and I have seen in our lifetime.
5.
What was their one of their key defining traits? Having a kick-ass three technique defensive tackle, and Byron Murphy can absolutely be that.
Are you talking about
For
Tommy Harris?
Tommy Harris and actually even Tank Johnson. That was a year where the Bears basically double dipped to make sure that they always had a good three technique. Of course, Tank Johnson, of course, making some
Mm-hmm.
highly questionable decisions that
Mm-hmm.
that cost him and the Bears, quite frankly. But Byron Murphy, the second out of Texas, he has been phenomenal. I mean, keeping it to that same position, going Johnny Newton out of Illinois at defensive tackle. I mean, I'm a sucker for interior pass rushers just because we see the impact that
Yeah,
they can
you like
have.
more. You like Aaron
Aaron
Donald,
Donald, like yeah, like
Warren
even
Sapp.
JJ Watt. I know he plays defensive end, but because it's in a 3-4 front, he's not really edge rushing. He's an inline defensive line player.
Sure.
Those are the type of guys that I think really have a huge impact on the game, and are just really do a great job of freeing up everybody else. I would not at all be disappointed if the Bears said, we'll trade back a couple of spots, grab an extra pick or
I would
something like
be.
that, get Byron
I would
Murphy as
be.
a defensive tackle.
And I would be very disappointed because I'm at the stage of go all in for your quarterback. You're already in so much with this
Mhm.
offseason, Keenan Allen, DeAndre Swift, Gerald Everett. I'm not necessarily like I would lean Roma Dunze with the ninth pick if he's
If he's
there.
there.
But if not him, I would rather see them get an offensive lineman personally than defense. But that's just my personal wish
Sure.
list for the Bears. I want that number 9 pick, or if they trade up or down, I want it to be an offensive player personally, because I think that's what
Mhm.
the Bears need the most, to kind of be all in on your guy, right? All these years of, bad offensive investment, all these years of not giving your quarterback a chance. Let's make this a top 10 situation for a quarterback in the league, all in for Caleb Williams. I'm all in
Sure.
on Dallas Turner personally, Tom.
Mhm.
This edge rusher out of Alabama, 10 sacks last year, ranked second in the SEC in QB pressures. He is 6'4", 247 pounds, and ran a 4.46 40-yard dash time. Big time athlete. You listen to some of the scouts out there, they say he's got a better ceiling than Will Anderson out of Alabama, the defensive
Ooh,
rookie of the year
that's
this
tall
last
timber.
year. Now, Will Anderson is more polished, as they say. He was more developed. Dallas
Mhm.
Turner is a little bit more of a pure athlete, but he's a pure athlete that put up 10 sacks in the SEC last year. This is the best prospect on defense. This is a guy that we could be talking about the gold jacket if all works out. I mean,
Really?
you're talking about Alabama offensive linemen.
Mhm.
Alabama pass rushers generally are
Typically do pretty
really,
all
really
right.
good. They do just all right in the NFL. Will Anderson was a slam dunk pick. I think Dallas Turner is going to be a slam dunk pick as well. That is my top defensive player. If I'm drafting defense, that's the first guy I'm taking. Love Dallas Turner. Jared Verse, back
Mhm.
to back seasons of 9 sacks for Florida State. 29 and a half tackles for loss as well. Really good athlete, great lineman, a pass rusher to look out for the next level. Very, very solid player, Jared Verse. I'll give you a couple corners. I think Terrion Arnold out of Alabama. Now, the knock on him is he's not fast enough. Well,
Mhm.
he's a player. I mean, 5 picks last year to lead the SEC. He's got good technique. He's quick in little spaces. Just because the 40-yard time's not the best out of him, I would not be sleeping on him. Now, a big-time athlete at cornerback is Toledo's Kenyon Mitchell, physical corner, really fast, considered actually by a lot of experts as the top cornerback in the draft. So, I mean, every position matters. Linebackers matter. Safeties matter. D tackles do matter, Tom. But if I'm looking at what are the 2 most important positions on defense, defensive end is number 1, and cornerback, in my opinion, is number 2. If I'm drafting as a NFL GM, I'm looking for what are the best pass rushers, the D linemen, and who are the top corners. Hence why, for my top defensive players, I picked 2 pass rushers and 2 cornerbacks. All 4 of these guys will be really good players. But Dallas Turner specifically, Tom, I'm a helmet chaser.
Hmm.
I'm a Bama guy. They've got the
Oh, good
most.
Lord.
They've got the most first round picks, the most Pro Bowlers. This is my Amari Cooper Alabama helmet. One of my customers got me at work, so I put a little bit of extra credence to the Alabama guys. So I
Sure.
like Dallas Turner. Roll Tide, baby. Roll Tide.
Yeah, and also keep an eye out for Cooper DeJean out of Iowa. I think he's
They're
projected to
good at
be
defense.
a first round pick,
They're always
maybe
good at
second round.
defense. Is that the defensive
Yeah,
back?
yeah, defensive back, and that's
Had a
one of
pick
the
six last year. He was a kick and
that's
punt returner.
yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like immediate special teams type of player, and he's somebody that is listed out as being interchangeable at cornerback, safety, or playing in the nickel, and that's something that is super duper key, especially with the modern NFL offense. You need to have interchangeable pieces on defense, guys that can do a little bit of everything. So I think he's going to be somebody who's going to be a top player as well.
Second
Which
round
one's
pick,
that?
Nick Bolton.
Oh,
Second
there you
round pick.
go.
Love it. Go
There you
Chiefs.
go. Well, that concludes our draft preview. Of course, we're looking forward to doing a recap next week once all the landing spots are filled out. I mean, I'm sure a lot of these names are going to be referenced again, but who knows? There might be somebody that kind of fits into a different type of situation that we might say, that could be really interesting, or damn, that is a shame. For example,
Sure.
Zach Charbonnet when in Seattle Seahawks, a lot of folks said, "Oh, he's going to be a good running back," and then where does he go? A place that already has a really good running back in Kenneth Walker III. So that not necessarily a great situation for that player individually, but we'll be touching on all of those things. Now, let's go ahead and touch upon our betting locks of the week. We been
Tom,
pounding
you're
our
a
chests.
pessimist.
We've
Every
We've been
look,
pounding our chests as a show for multiple weeks now,
and
and
I'm
we
a
have gotten
positive.
our comeuppance. We've had
Sure.
an 0-6 week on locks of
All
the
right.
week.
All right.
So I think if we are going to say that we are so star spangled awesome, I think it is completely fair to
All
point
right.
out that sometimes we just get it completely wrong.
Yeah, I had a good betting weekend personally, just not the ones I picked on our show. Definitely, I actually faded you on the Pacers and Bucks game instead of tailing you. I won a lot of money fading you
Oh, there you
with the
go.
Bucks winning. But as for the picks on the show, we've had some 6-0 weeks, some 5-1 weeks, some 4-2 weeks. This was our first 0-6 for a while. I'm still 4 games over on the season for this program. I'm definitely a lot more than 4 games over, period, though. It's been
Mhm.
a good betting year, Tom. I look at the bank account, and if it has 4 digits in front of my net gain, you're doing good betting. 36, 32, and 1 on the season on this program. 3 betting locks a week for me. 41 and 28 for you. 13 over. It was the first over week for the show in
Mhm.
I can't remember if
Been a
ever.
while.
It's been a
Been a
while.
while.
We both missed the Kings and Pelicans. We had Kings -1. The Pelicans had all the injuries. We failed to account for that New Orleans just has Sacramento's number. So the Pelicans winning 105-98.
Mhm.
I think it was like they won 5 or 6 games against them total this season, regular season and play-in counted. I also missed the fact that the Nuggets owned the Lakers. Had I bet on game 2, Lakers plus 7.5, it would have paid off. Game 1, Nuggets win by 11. Lakers were up early. Lakers are right there until the fourth quarter. That altitude caught up to the Lakers like it did last night, blowing a 20-point lead and losing by 2. That crazy Jamal Murray buzzer beater. I know next week we'll have some NBA playoffs. Definitely after next week's show, when we wrap up the draft, NBA will be the heavy topic in the next month or two as we go through the playoffs. I told you, Tom, do not pick the Bulls. I had Miami Heat. You picked the Bulls +2. The Bulls
Mhm.
lost by, what is that? Carried
A
the
lot.
21 points,
Yeah.
112-91. So Bulls Heat over 205 points was my pick. I got barbecued. It was 203 points. It was 47-37 at the half. They picked it up in the second half. I needed a late three or something, came up just short. So good year for us. Winning record, both of us. It was admittedly a tough week. What do you got to rebound here? I know you're going to go NFL draft, which
yeah,
I won't, but I know that's where you're headed.
yeah. No, I'm going NFL draft, and the thing to keep in mind is that really all the best values are already so juiced. Like we can't really pick them for this show, but one that moved, but not out of the range. Used to be plus 140. It's now minus 125. But Jonathan Brooks to be the RB1 of this draft, the first running back to have his name called. Not sure where it's going to be. I know a lot of folks are going to pencil in Dallas, as the Cowboys do have a bit of a need at running back, and Jerry Jones does like players who were at Texas. I think that's a pretty good fit there.
Zeke, Emmitt Smith,
running backs.
Emmitt Smith worked back in the day,
and this is a good example of if you want Jonathan Brooks as the Dallas Cowboys, you maybe should still sign like a halfway decent running back, because right now everybody and their mother knows that you're going to want to pick up Jonathan Brooks.
You're not
as your top running fan? No, I don't typically look at 5'5" men and say, okay, that's a 3-down NFL running back right there.
That's fair.
Let's see. I already hyped up Lad McConkey as a bit of a sleeper. His over-under position is 35.5 last I checked at minus 102. I'll go ahead and take the under. I think that there are any number of teams in the back half of the draft that are going to look to add to their wide receiver rooms.
Under what? Say that again.
Under 35.5.
So he gets
drafted. If he's picked prior to pick 36. Where he can go to a place like,
top 35 pick in the draft.
Exactly. He could go to perhaps Kansas City. Buffalo has a need. I mean, looking at a team that's
they do.
In the second round.
I mean, the Chargers again.
In the second round, you've got the New England Patriots, Carolina Panthers. I mean, Arizona Cardinals could go ahead and pick them. Like, there's a lot of teams that could use a receiver. This is a good year to go for receiver. But I think that we're going to see those guys go earlier than their positions, which is why I'm also going to say Adonai Mitchell under 27.5. You can get that at plus 102 as his draft position. That one's going to be a little bit trickier, as that's a bit earlier on in the draft. I know the cutoff for him is probably Buffalo. For that, I don't necessarily know if some of the teams right before, like Green Bay, Minnesota, Miami, if they're going to go with him. So that's probably a little bit riskier, where there's some slight plus money on that, but I'll go with him under 27.5. So I've got Jonathan Brooks, first overall running back, Lad McConkey, picked prior to pick 36, a top 35 pick, and I've got Adonai Mitchell as a top 27 pick. I look forward to all of these being wrong as teams move up and down the draft.
Sure.
And again, this is going to tie in to talking about the Atlanta Falcons and possibly some punishments they could be facing. It's been floated maybe that they go from pick 8 down to pick 32, which moves all these teams up, which means little extra value could be there. Grab it now before the markets might move on that.
All right, so Tom,
don't grab it, because I'm not a betting expert. So
sure,
don't. This is entertainment value only.
Well, you are a betting expert,
fine,
based on your record. But I will say, I personally don't like making. Not that I have any ability to control any of the NBA games or NFL, MLB, soccer, you name the sport. I don't claim to know anything, extra. I don't have the script, but I don't like betting on stuff that I feel like I have no control over. I feel like I can crunch the numbers. I can look at, past trends, the feel for the games. Personally, I don't like doing draft statuses.
Yeah,
I don't like doing draft picks.
This is purely fun. I've done this for how many years as a themed thing. So that's the only reason I go for this sort of
I'm just saying I don't like making those kind of bets. I will be staying away from the NFL draft, and I will be heading to the NBA playoffs. It's been a relatively good year betting NBA for me. Did do well on Sunday's games and Monday's games, but last week it was a disaster betting NBA playoffs for this program. So definitely think This week it'll turn around. I'm going to go Bucks -1 over the Pacers. Kind of like my internal hope, Tom. I know I picked Nuggets to win the championship at our NBA playoff preview last week, and I said, I guess I'll put the Celtics in, but I want the Bucks to make it, and I could see the Bucks making it. My thought was Giannis sits out a couple games that allows Dame Lillard to get his rhythm. And that's what happened in game one. 35 points, 6 of 11 threes. Chris Middleton, 23 points, made 9 of 14 shots. Those two guys in particular, Tom, proven playoff guys that have made multiple big shots on the biggest stage. So I think Dame Lillard also had a quote that he's missed the playoffs the last couple of years. He went to Coachella, didn't even want to go to Coachella. He had nothing else to do. So I think the Bucks keep that momentum going. It's a 1-point spread. They're at home in this game against the Pacers, who, by the way, don't have guys with playoff pedigree. They have a young team. Young teams on the road in the playoffs takes a little bit to get going. I think Milwaukee takes a 2-0 lead at home. I like them to win by more than 1 point. Bucks -1 over the Pacers. So far, Tom Casselman, this is tonight, by the way, tonight's games. The home team has won every game in the NBA playoffs. A road team has to win at some point, and I think it's going to be the Mavericks. Mavs -1.5 at the Clippers in game 2. I don't think Kawhi Leonard will play again. Dallas, it was weird because Dallas played really good down the stretch. They were probably the best team in basketball the last month or so of the NBA season. And quite frankly, they laid an egg in the first half against the Clippers. But they bounced back in the second half. I look at that first half as more of an outlier. I mean, Luka and Kyrie, they put up numbers. Luka shot, though, 11 of 26. A little bit low for him. He's a higher percentage guy than that. They'll get some help from the other guys. I think James Harden, personally, Tom, has a little bit left in the tank, a little bit more than most people think. But I don't think James Harden is putting up 28 points in game 2. I don't think Russell Westbrook is shooting 5 of 8 in game 2. I don't think Ivan Zubac is scoring 20 points in game 2. It was kind of a perfect storm of all the Clipper players playing their best, all the Mavs players not playing their best, maybe outside of Kyrie, who had a good game. So I think Dallas is going to win this game. They win by 2 or more. They even up the series at 1. Give me the Mavericks tonight. Now, this is a pick I wanted to make last week, Tom. I know it's a few days away. I won a lot of money on this last weekend. My classic bet of Messi to score, Miami to win, then I parlayed them together. The goal scorer props are not out yet, Tom Casselman, but if they were, I'm guessing it'll be -155. We try to keep it at -125, -130 for the show. I'll give you plus money. Inter Miami +110. I'll even risk Messi not playing in this game, which I think he will play. New England Revolution at home. Inter Miami is first in the Eastern Conference. New England Revolution, Tom, last place. +110, plus money on a Leo Messi-led team to win an MLS game. When Messi plays, they almost always win. Last week, I watch all the Messi games. He looked rejuvenated. He looked fully healthy. He scored 2 goals, had an assist, had some incredible dribbles, some incredible technique. Messi's back, baby. Inter Miami's going to roll against Revolution. This is a bet that you want to take a lot of money, put it all in on Miami, and make it now. Because once the lineups get announced, Tom, the money goes to, from +110, it's going to go to -130. When they're 100% sure Messi is playing, all sources lead you to believe that Messi will play in this game. Inter Miami wins big on the road against Revolution. A record crowd expected. It's going to be a show for the GOAT, Lionel Andres Messi, baby.
All right. Let's move to our trivia for the week. Let's see. I've got a couple of evergreen ones coming, but let's go ahead. We've talked a lot of offense. Let's see. Actually, I'll let you go first because I do need to fact check this a little bit.
Okay.
So yeah, go ahead with your trivia question.
All right. So since 1967, Tom, 26 quarterbacks have been drafted number one overall. Only four are in the Hall of Fame right now. Now, asterisk, Eli Manning, Matthew
Mhm.
Stafford will likely get in the Hall of Fame.
But
Joe
they're not going to
Burrow
count.
has that potential. So there's a few number one guys that either are current or recently retired. Obviously, Bryce Young, current player. So there could be a few more.
Mhm.
Manning and Stafford likely will take that total to six, assuming Joe Burrow plays to his potential, stays healthy, possibly seven. But even if you want to go with those guys, that's still like a pretty low turnover. Like you are far more likely to not make the Hall of Fame as a number one overall pick as a quarterback than you are to make it. So, can you name the four current number one overall picks quarterbacks that are in the Hall of Fame? Only four, Tom, since
Okay.
67, since the 67 draft.
Shame on me for not knowing this for a fact. Is Peyton Manning eligible yet for the Hall of Fame? Is he in?
Peyton
Because he would
Manning
be my
is in the
first.
Hall of Fame.
Okay, so he's one because he went number one overall to the Colts in
He
what was it,
he got in at
98?
I think it was 99, 98, 99. He just got in the Hall of Fame, I think like 2023, I think his class was.
Gotcha.
So he would
Yeah,
have been
so
in first
he's
ballot. So he retired in 2015. So actually, it might have been 2020 than it was, or 2021. So
right.
Peyton Manning is in the Hall of Fame, and
So
he
that's
was
one.
drafted in 98.
There
So
was
yeah,
and there's an infamous coin flip that determined the number one overall draft pick, I believe, back in like the 60s or 70s. Terry Bradshaw for the Pittsburgh Steelers could have been a Chicago Bear, and of course, would not be wearing a gold jacket if that were the case. Terry Bradshaw to the
probably
Hall of
not.
Fame.
Terry Bradshaw.
Um, okay,
There's
so
two
that's the
others.
two that I know. Uh, so for John Elway, he was chosen number one overall and then traded, correct?
John Elway is
So
one of
he would
them.
be in.
Yep.
All right. So then, who is the fourth? I don't think Marino was number one overall out of Pittsburgh, was
No,
he?
he was the same draft as Elway. He went in the 20s, actually, Dan Marino.
Talk about a miss right
Steal.
there.
Yeah.
Number
Pittsburgh guy,
one.
Marino. A
Number
lot of Pitt
one.
guys. Donald, McCoy, Fitzgerald. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of great Pittsburgh guys. Darrell
Quarterback
Revis.
Hall
This
of
is not a
Fame.
Pittsburgh guy. It's a
Would
very,
would
very famous quarterback name.
would Joe Montana out of Notre Dame?
No, he was
Was
a
he number
third
one?
round pick.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
talk about another steal.
Let's see.
Very famous quarterback. I think a little bit overrated personally, but very famous quarterback.
Famous and overrated. Joe Namath? Was he a number one overall?
Not Joe Namath. Still really good. I want to put a caveat on this guy. He should be in the Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that, he won a lot. Let me put it that way. Got a lot of the bling bling on the fingers.
Oh, Troy Aikman out of
Troy
USC or
Aikman.
UCLA.
UCLA.
Excuse me. Yes, UCLA for the
Yes.
Cowboys.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's pretty rarefied air. So really, what we're saying is that Caleb Williams is probably not going to be wearing the gold
the
jacket
odds
anymore.
are against him,
That's already
but I
against him.
think he'll make it. I think he'll get it done. Go Caleb. So
All
Stafford,
right.
though, Stafford, Eli Manning will get in as well. I would say Stafford's pretty safe at this stage in his career with the Super Bowl ring. Eli Manning definitely safe. And then Joe Burrow could potentially get there, Tom, as well.
All right. So for my trivia question, I did get this verified with a Yahoo article that came out uh, just a few days ago. But Kamen, can you tell me? We talked a lot of offense in this draft preview. Can you tell me the record for the most players on the offensive side of the ball selected in the first round of an NFL draft?
24.
No, it's lower than that. You went real high
Uh,
to begin with.
I know. 19.
It is 19. Can you give me the year when that happened? As a quick little follow up.
I'll go 1977 or something.
No, no, much more recent than that. It was the year 2009. That was the Matthew Stafford
Okay.
draft where he was picked first overall. 7 of the top 10 picks used on offensive players. We were
Oh, I
absolutely,
meant to go modern. I was thinking defense, but makes sense.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the current over under on Bovada for defensive players selected in round one is 11, which means that the betting markets have that record right there of 19 as the over under mark. If you want to go over 11 defensive players, minus 135. If you want to see NFL history, minus 105 to place a wager on that. But yeah, 19 players. We might see that record broken. I know certainly it's a top heavy top 10. We're going to probably see 9, maybe all 10 picks going on the offensive side of the ball. Depends on a lot of different things, though.
Yeah, I think we might have that record broken. I have to look at it, but I roughly eyeballing it, like just by looking at it,
Mm-hmm.
roughly eyeballing drafts, there was about 20, give or take, offensive guys in the first round.
Well, if
So,
you want to go ahead and sprinkle, I know I've gotten you onto futures. Go minus
yeah.
105 for
All
NFL
right.
history.
I'll think about it.
Statements of the week. So I did a little bit of homework on this as the show's been going on. So the NFL has, I think, unofficially announced. They've kind of leaked it to the reporters. Adam Schefter, Ian Rappaport, that they will not be concluding their investigations on the Falcons and the Eagles for illegal tampering, which means we're not going to see kind of like a draft day announcement on any sort of pick um,
For this year's draft.
penalties or any things like that for the draft. So yeah, just wanted to follow up on that one really quickly. I know I've referenced that a couple of times as the NFL has been investigating, and we've seen tampering in the past with the Miami Dolphins trying to get Tom Brady when he was on the Patriots, and then also Sean Payton when he was coaching the Saints, illegally tampering with those guys, trying to get them into Miami. That, of course, cost Miami a first round pick last year, and I believe a third rounder this year. And so, really, I guess like the statement is that the NFL needs to have, I don't know, like more clearly defined rules or something along those lines. Like there have to be other mechanisms in place to try to curtail this tampering, because clearly teams feel a little too emboldened allowed. I mean, I know it's clearly against the rules to talk to players outside of the designated quote legal tampering period. And yet, whenever that opens up, we're getting breaking reports on these multi-million dollar, multi-year deals being signed within moments. So clearly, something is going on. But the NFL, short of making even more clear, even more concise rules, need to come down hard on these teams for tampering if that's something that they're going to continue to try to care about, particularly when we're looking at quarterback, a very important position, of highest profile position. Kirk Cousins said in his press conference, his introductory press conference, he basically said like, "Oh, this is the timeline of when like a trainer was talking to me and Kyle Pitts was talking to me, and basically it was all happening NFL Combine." And we don't know necessarily the extent of these conversations, but the fact that these sort of interactions were taking place definitely connotes that there was some shady dealings going on as far as that goes. So, what the reports are looking at right now, as far as the Falcons in particular, the Eagles a little bit less so with Saquon Barkley and having some inappropriate or unsanctioned contact, I guess I would say. The rumors are now that the Falcons are looking to trade out of that eighth pick up some extra draft capital the next year, kind of as some anticipation for the penalty that will be coming down. So I feel that's going to be fairly severe. Don't necessarily know if it will be that they lose a pick, if their pick moves from wherever it is to last in the first round next year, if they'll have to do some sort of swap with Minnesota, who had Kirk Cousins under contract. But this is something that has now happened multiple times within the past couple of years as far as the tampering goes. Clearly, the NFL has a little bit of a growing problem on their hands as far as these teams interacting with players before they're supposed to.
Yeah, hopefully they get that all fixed up. Corruption Casselman, as I call him, he loves to get these corrupt stories out
Well, that makes it
there.
sound like I'm a fan of corruption.
You're not a fan of corruption. You're actually the opposite. You got to point it all out. So
I'll get my superhero suit with a CC on the front, and it'll be like, oh, Caitlin Clark.
yeah, I love Caitlin
Not
Clark.
nearly as talented or
Shout
famous
out to that
or
Nike deal for
wealthy.
Caitlin Clark, the number
Get
one
that bag.
overall pick in the WNBA draft here recently. All right, statement of the week. I'm going to keep it draft related. I will say there's some rumors out there, trades. I don't think it's going to happen. But I just want to just go ahead and say this, that the Arizona Cardinals should invest in Kyler Murray. They should not consider, trading the fourth pick. They should keep that fourth pick and get Marvin Harrison Jr. Kyler Murray is better than any quarterback in this draft except for Caleb Williams. This is a guy that I think has gotten a raw deal, Tom, looking at the numbers, 94 touchdowns and 46 interceptions. We're looking at an exact 2-to-1 touchdown to pick ratio, which is pretty solid. A guy that's had just under 4,000 passing yards multiple times, a great running quarterback. You add in the rushing factor, just a really, really solid quarterback, a guy that is a top 15 quarterback and playing at his best, a top 10 quarterback in the National Football League. His numbers were great with DeAndre Hopkins. He loses Hopkins, numbers go down, injuries add up. But we saw how important he is last year. The Cardinals had one win without him last year. And then he comes in and is 3-5 down the stretch. There's some off-field question marks. Studying the playbook, putting in that extra time. Does the guy have to grow and mature? Yes, he does. But he's a great quarterback. He's got a big arm, an accurate arm, a great athlete. You invest in a really good quarterback in Kyler Murray, get him Marvin Harrison Jr., and the numbers will go up. I mean, I think certainly, Tom, you saw the Rams lose Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey in recent years. Stafford and Kupp are getting up there. I'm not saying the Cardinals are ready to be a playoff team this year, but you look at where they might be in 2-3 years. This could be a playoff team with, Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr., such an elite level prospect. Don't do something silly like trade down in the draft. Don't do something silly like trade for a McCarthy pick, get JJ McCarthy. Don't oversimplify this. Invest in your quarterback like we saw the Bengals do with Joe Burrow, with Jamar Chase a few years ago. That certainly worked. They went to a Super Bowl. They beat the Chiefs in the playoffs, which nobody does. And I'll say the same thing for the Chargers. Double down. You got rid of your receivers, Mike Williams, Justin Herbert. Make the fifth pick, make it Malik Neighbors. And everybody needs offensive line. There's offensive line. The Chargers need that as well. But you can get line over time. When you have a big level talent like a Marvin Harrison Jr., like a Malik Neighbors, I'm looking at those teams, the Cardinals and Chargers. Don't mess this up. Get your quarterbacks his number one receivers for years to come.
Yeah, and really quickly, just like a small little bit of breaking news, the Chicago Bears have set a time for press conference on Wednesday where they're expected to announce plans for a new domed stadium in the city. I know Arlington Heights, they purchased the property.
Okay.
That used to be the Arlington racetrack, and then there was a significant acreage around that.
Okay,
it looks like they are perhaps moving forward with, from the initial reports, demolishing Soldier Field and then building up a domed stadium on the lakefront. So, of course, a lot more details will be coming out as far as that goes. This is just like the initial.
I know we say Bears cold weather, Tom, but I want to go to a Bear game in December and not freeze my butt off. Call me a modernist. Would be nice. I'll take it. I'll take the dome stadium. I'll be going to a lot more Bear football games if they're in a dome versus not in a dome. I'll tell you that much.
Call me a modernist. I don't really want to see any public money going to this venture. So that's the sort of thing I'll have my eye on. But that's a very, very different show and different conversation to have. So depending on what details.
Casselman is at it.
Well, not corruption. It's just more of like civic living and tax dollars and whatnot. And I don't know. I kind of like the notion of having well-funded schools, for example, infrastructure, whatnot, over a private entity getting free money. But
Yeah,
anyway,
that's
that will wrap it up for our show this week. NFL draft will be kicking off on Thursday and going through the entire weekend, 7 rounds of fun. And then, of course, the priority free agents after all of that. And there's going to be some moving, there's going to be some shaking, there's going to be trades galore, a lot to look at. The NFL landscape is certainly going to be, I think, vastly different. I would not at all be surprised if we see deals kind of akin to the A.J. Brown Tennessee trade, where players are going to be moved for picks as well. We're going to have a lot of different stuff to talk about next week for sure, and looking forward to it.
Yeah, we recorded this on a Tuesday afternoon in case there is some breaking draft news. Don't call us unknowledgeable. This was a Tuesday afternoon show. We'll get this posted here tonight for all the viewers to enjoy. Thank you so much, Tom, for co-hosting, producing as always. I really wanted to make this show as more of a talent evaluation show. I know we'll talk more about fit. We'll have a better idea of how things shake out in the NFL draft. We'll be talking about steals of the draft, kind of recapping the whole NFL draft next week. We'll probably touch on some NBA playoffs next week as well. Like I mentioned, the NBA playoffs will be a heavy talking point, in May and June for us. Might touch on some baseball, probably not next week, but probably in the coming weeks. We'll probably touch on the MLB. A lot of great stuff going on in sports, Tom. As always, love this show. Thanks for doing this with me. Thank you to all the listeners, the viewers, the watchers. You guys are awesome. And we'll see you guys next week.